At 33, Neymar enters a strange twilight zone in his career. He is no longer the wild, dyed-hair wonderkid of the 2014 World Cup. Yet, he never quite reached the perfect, iconic status expected in 2018 or 2022, where his immense talent was always shadowed by injuries, pressure, and endless controversy. The Neymar of today is quieter, slower, but still carries the heavy burden of unfinished business. In the heart of São Paulo, in a moment that seemed deceptively ordinary, he uttered a sentence that made all of Brazil fall silent. "If we make the final, I promise I will score." The 2026 World Cup might be the last time the star born in '92 has enough time left to dream. A new Brazilian generation is rising, faster, stronger, and burdened with fewer memories. And amidst that ruthless cycle, he stands at risk of being viewed as merely a part of an unfinished past. The big question, therefore, is not just for Neymar, but for Brazilian football itself. Can the Seleção enter the 2026 World Cup without giving their number 10 one last chance to complete his story? Santos' recent season wasn't just a disappointing campaign, it was a fight for survival. The club that once produced Pelé faced the risk of relegation, a prospect that almost insulted the history of one of Brazil's most traditional heavyweights. A thin squad, a lack of true stars, inconsistent form, and immense media pressure caused Santos to slide into a deep crisis. For them, every passing round was another warning that a catastrophe was entirely possible. In that backdrop, Neymar returned. He didn't arrive from the bright lights of the Champions League or with a $100 million contract, but emerged from days of injury, skepticism, and unfinished ambition. He returned to Santos at the start of the year, quietly, but at the perfect moment. 12 goals and 6 assists in 30 games might not be a staggering statistic to some, but for Santos, it was the heartbeat of the entire season. Specifically, the 4 goals in the final 3 games, matches of life and death, were the decisive blows that kept the club in the top flight. The value he brought went far beyond the numbers. The stands were packed again, the locker room atmosphere transformed, and Santos, at least in the final stretch, was no longer a team playing in fear. Neymar scored to pull Santos back onto the Brazilian football map. In terms of both performance and image, Santos was saved. But as the sigh of relief faded, a massive question remained hanging in the air. Is that enough for the 33-year-old to open the door to the 2026 World Cup? The last time we saw him wearing the Seleção jersey was on October 17, 2023, during a haunting trip to Uruguay in the World Cup qualifiers. It was an evening that seemed all too familiar for Neymar, enduring the pressure of tight marking, falling down, but this time, he didn't get back up. The subsequent diagnosis read like a painful sentence: a torn ACL and a torn meniscus in his left knee. Since that moment, the superstar nearly vanished from the Brazilian national team map. 2 years passed, and his name was consistently absent from the squad lists. Despite all the debates from fans, under Carlo Ancelotti, the criteria were made public. Only players with 100% physical fitness would be called up. It was a scientifically sound statement, but it inadvertently turned him into a victim of his own injury history. The media began to ask, is Neymar finished? Or is he simply no longer a fit for rejuvenating Seleção? The reality became even harsher as Neymar prepared for arthroscopic surgery on his left knee. With an expected recovery time of about a month. It sounds short, but at age 33, every surgery is a race against time where the body does not recover as easily as before. Every day out of action is a step backward in the fierce competition for the national team. But is football really just a story of minutes run, fitness charts, and GPS data? Or is there still room for players who can change history with a single moment, as he has done before, and still yearns to do once more? After helping Santos avoid relegation, Neymar faces a decision that seems small but could define the rest of his international career. The first option, and the most emotional one, extend with Santos until the 2026 World Cup. The deal is expected to last only 6 months, a safe, low-risk choice. It aligns with the personal desire Neymar has often admitted, to stay where he calls home. At Santos, he is protected, absolutely trusted, and plays in an environment that understands his fragile body better than anywhere else. But that very safety poses a major problem. Santos is not the ideal environment to prepare for a World Cup campaign. The intensity is lower, international pressure is almost non-existent, and every excellent performance is easily dismissed as not enough. With a Brazil coach like Ancelotti who prioritizes physical intensity, shining at Santos might struggle to create the necessary noise to get Neymar back in the World Cup race. This is why the name Flamengo has started to appear as a realistic invitation. The reigning Copa Libertadores and Brasileiro champions possess a fiercely competitive environment, immense media pressure, and a spotlight that rivals Europe. There, Neymar would not be coddled. He would have to prove himself every minute on the pitch. But it is also there that every moment of brilliance would be witnessed by all of Brazil. Neymar isn't starved for affection. What he needs right now is professional validation. And Flamengo could be the final springboard for him to seize that ticket to the 2026 World Cup. The Neymar of today is no longer the image attached to lavish parties, controversial statuses, or moments where he became a headline for all the wrong reasons. At 33, he appears quieter, more reserved. Social media is no longer where he vents his emotions. The pitch is now the only space where he answers his doubters. This shift isn't loud, but it is enough to show a Neymar who is acutely aware that time is no longer on his side. In this context, the promise made in São Paulo carries a completely different weight. If we make the final, I promise I will score. This wasn't arrogance. It was a declaration of responsibility from a player who understands he might have only one last chance to define his World Cup legacy. For the first time, he spoke about the biggest dream of a footballer's life, not with the recklessness of youth, but with the tone of a man ready to carry the burden. In reality, Brazil doesn't need the Neymar of 10 years ago. The Seleção doesn't need a number 10 to run for 90 minutes, dribbling constantly or creating dozens of breakthroughs. What Brazil needs from Neymar are things that only time can accumulate: decisive moments, battle-hardened experience, and courage when the team collapses under pressure. When the game is locked down, when the crowd starts to doubt, when a single moment can decide the fate of the entire tournament, that is when he can appear. Not as a star demanding service, but as a veteran who knows the value of every remaining second in his career. And perhaps, that version is exactly what Brazil is missing for the 2026 World Cup. Modern elite football is heavily dominated by data, distance covered, sprint numbers, fitness charts, but the World Cup has never been just a contest of the healthiest lungs. The history of the planet's biggest tournament is filled with moments created by stars who were past their physical prime but never lost the head and heart of a genius. Brazil, too, has won championships not because they had the youngest squad, but thanks to players who knew how to show up exactly when history called their name. In that context, Neymar deserves the right to be a choice, not to be discarded simply because of biological statistics. With nearly 80 goals for the national team, he is the greatest scorer in Seleção history. He has been through 3 World Cups, but paradoxically, he has never played a single tournament in perfect physical condition. 2014 ended in tears with a broken back. 2018 saw a return at less than 100%, and 2022 was haunted by an ankle injury at the most critical moment. If there is one player who deserves a complete World Cup, it is this flawed genius. Neymar has never stood before the public to beg for a starting spot. At this stage of his career, he understands he is no longer the mandatory center of every plan. What he needs, and what he deserves, is simply a fair chance. A chance to compete on level ground. To be judged by what he can still bring to the table, not by the prejudices of his injury-riddled past. If the World Cup is where history is written, it should also be where unfinished stories are brought to a worthy close. Brazilian football has produced too many geniuses, but not everyone gets the chance to say their own goodbye on the biggest stage. And so, this call is not just for the former Barcelona player, but for the game itself. Please, let Neymar play the World Cup, not because of the past, but because football always needs a deserving ending.